The More You Know is a media and tech literacy series produced by IndependenThinker. It aims to help the public become more knowledgeable about our digital world. In this episode, we cover the Anthropic Pentagon standoff, the AI guardrails, and national security.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a situation today that really tests the boundaries of who actually controls the future of technology.
Yeah, it's a huge one.
I want you to consider a paradox for a second. How does a $380 billion artificial intelligence startup, a company whose entire founding identity is literally based on safety first,
Right.
how does that company end up in a standoff with the Pentagon involving threats of a Korean War-era federal takeover? Today, we are exploring the intersection of AI, national security, and this massive collision between corporate boundary setting and, well, raw government power. Our goal is to map out exactly how this unprecedented standoff came to be.
And to do that, we are pulling from a stack of incredibly timely sources. We have an extensive video breakdown by the AI and tech expert Sabrina Reminoff.
She's great.
She really is. Just a quick note before we dive into the timeline here, because this situation involves recent actions by the current U.S. administration and the military, things not naturally politically charged.
Of course.
So our goal today isn't to take a side. We certainly aren't endorsing any of the viewpoints or policies of the government or the military or even the tech companies involved. We are simply acting as your guides to unpack exactly what happened and to impartially report the ideas presented in these sources.
Exactly. And Sabrina Romanov is a fantastic lens for this. I mean, she isn't just watching from the sidelines. She is on this public mission to teach 1 million people about AI. She is the solo founder of Blutato.com, and she uses Anthropic's AI, Claude code every single day to build software.
Right, so she brings that hands-on daily practitioner experience, which really grounds our understanding of what these AI models are actually capable of doing in the real world.
Which is the pivot point for this entire conflict.
Exactly. You have to understand the capabilities of the technology before you can understand why the government wants it so badly and why the creators are so terrified of how it might be used.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really grasp the tension in the room, we have to rewind to the origins of Anthropic. Back in 2021, Dario and Daniela Amade were in senior leadership over at OpenAI. Dario was the VP of Research. Daniela ran safety and policy.
But they left.
Right. The sources indicate they walked away because they fundamentally felt the industry wasn't taking AI safety seriously enough. They gathered a team and founded Anthropic with a very specific premise: build the most capable AI in the world, but make it the safest.
And that founding mission is exactly what makes the current reality so jarring. I mean, this company, birthed from an obsession with guardrails and cautious scaling, somehow ended up building the deepest military AI integration of any frontier lab to date.
And just to clarify, when we say frontier lab, we're talking about the handful of companies pushing the absolute state-of-the-art boundaries of AI, right?
Correct. The company's building the massive foundational models.
Yeah.
Anthropic managed to get their AI model, Claude, embedded deep inside the Pentagon's most sensitive, highly classified systems.
Wow.
We are talking about intelligence analysis, cyber operations, operational planning. They did this through a major partnership with Palantir, running everything on classified networks that the general public will just never have access to.
So they aren't just selling, like, basic software licenses. They are woven into the fabric of military intelligence. But that integration leads us to the catalyst for this whole crisis.
Yeah. January 2026.
Right. The U.S. military launched an operation to capture Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. And the sources note that during this raid, there was kinetic fire, people were shot, lethal force was used.
And in the immediate aftermath of that operation, an executive from Anthropic reached out to Palantir with a very pointed question. They wanted to know if Claude was involved in the Maduro raid.
Just asking that question implies a level of discomfort, doesn't it? Like they are checking to see if their technology crossed a line.
It absolutely implies a boundary check. Now, Anthropic CEO Dario Amade later claimed this was just standard routine operational conversation, just a vendor checking in on how their software is being utilized. But in the halls of the Pentagon, that question landed like a bomb. It signaled that a private tech vendor might try to dictate or judge how the military conducts its operations.
Which is a huge red flag for the military.
The damage to the relationship was instantaneous.
And we have to look at the atmosphere in the Pentagon at that exact moment. President Trump had recently signed an executive order officially renaming the Department of Defense back to its pre-1947 name, the Department of War.
Which is a massive shift.
Huge. And the sources point out that the cost estimates for this massive rebrand ranged anywhere from $125 million to $2 billion.
Right, because it wasn't just a name change. It was a profound shift in posture. The secretary, Pete Hegseth, embraced this aggressive new identity immediately. The focus was on unambiguous military strength.
So you have a newly minted Department of War leaning heavily into a wartime posture, suddenly dealing with a Silicon Valley AI startup, asking nervous questions about whether their software was used in a kinetic operation.
It is a massive culture clash.
Which brings us to a historic confrontation. February 24th, 2026. Defense Secretary Hegseth sits down across from Anthropic CEO Dario Amade.
And this is where it escalates.
The secretary delivers an ultimatum straight from the president, giving the company until Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time to comply with their demands. And he lays out 3 staggering threats if they refuse.
Let's break down those 3 threats because each one is more severe than the last.
Yeah.
So threat number 1, the government will cancel their $200 million contract and completely offboard Anthropic from every military system.
I mean, losing a $200 million contract is brutal, but a company valued at $380 billion could technically survive that financial hit.
They could. They absolutely could. But threat number 2 is where it gets dangerous. The Pentagon threatened to officially label Anthropic a supply chain risk.
That sounds bureaucratic, but it's actually devastating, isn't it?
It's a corporate death sentence. The supply chain risk designation is a severe label normally reserved for hostile foreign adversaries.
Wow.
Think about companies tied to the intelligence services of adversarial nations. If the U.S. government slaps that label on an American tech startup, it means no federal agency can do business with them. And by extension, most major allied governments and massive enterprise corporations would immediately drop them to avoid violating federal compliance.
So it basically isolates the company globally.
Completely. And then there's the third threat, which is just wild. Yeah. The government threatened to invoke the Defense Production Act.
The 1950s law.
Yes. Passed at the start of the Korean War. It was originally designed for wartime manufacturing emergencies, giving the president the authority to force a domestic industry to prioritize government contracts, like forcing a commercial car factory to start building tanks for the war effort.
But they aren't building tanks. They are building code. The Pentagon was threatening to use a 1950s manufacturing law to legally force Anthropic's engineers to go into their own software and remove the safety features.
What's fascinating here is the sheer contradiction of the government's stance. An expert from the Center for a New American Security pointed this out in the sources, and it captures the absurdity perfectly.
Oh, love this quote.
The government is essentially telling Anthropic, you are such a massive national security risk that we are going to blacklist you and kick you out of all our systems. But simultaneously, your AI is so essential to our national security that we are going to use a wartime law to force you to keep providing it to us.
It's a totally paradoxical message. You are a severe threat, but we absolutely cannot function without you. So what exactly was the Pentagon demanding that caused Anthropic to risk everything rather than just nod and comply?
The demand was remarkably simple, which is what made it so broad. The Pentagon told Anthropic they must accept any lawful use of Claude, and they must remove 2 very specific safety restrictions from the model. The Pentagon's position was essentially, trust us. We are the end user, and we will decide what is legal.
Lawful use. I mean, that sounds reasonable on the surface, but the sources dive into why that phrase is actually a minefield.
Oh, for sure. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to recognize that legal does not inherently mean safe.
Exactly.
The technological capability of AI has completely outpaced our current legal frameworks. For example, massive domestic surveillance, the scaled recording and processing of public conversations across millions of people is largely legal right now.
Because the laws just haven't caught up?
The law hasn't caught up because, until recently, nobody had the technology to process that much audio and text data instantly. So there was no need for a law against it.
That distinction between legal and safe brings us straight to Anthropic's red lines. They had 2 major boundaries they refused to cross, but they treated them very differently. Let's look at the first red line, which Dario Amade basically drew in permanent marker mass domestic surveillance.
He was uncompromising on this.
Completely. He actually wrote an essay calling the use of AI for massive domestic surveillance an existential species-level test for humanity. He labeled it entirely illegitimate.
And he took that hard line because the sheer scale of what AI can do fundamentally changes the nature of society. Ahmed argued that if you unleash a powerful AI across billions of communications, it has the analytical power to detect tiny pockets of disloyalty or dissent forming in real time.
Right.
It could flag them for the government to stamp out before a movement even has a chance to organize. It doesn't just limit resistance, it entirely eliminates the possibility of it.
But there is a massive caveat here that the sources highlight. Anthropic is not universally opposed to surveillance.
That's a really important distinction.
They explicitly support lawful foreign intelligence and counterintelligence missions. They have no problem with their AI being used to surveil foreign adversaries. Their hard stop, that permanent marker, red line, is strictly drawn at surveilling Americans domestically.
Right. Now, contract that domestic surveillance boundary with Anthropic's second red line, fully autonomous weapons.
This is the one that really surprised me. You would think killer robots would be the absolute hardest no for a company founded by safety researchers.
You would think so. But Anthropic drew this line in pencil. Their official statement acknowledges that fully autonomous weapons may prove critical for national defense in the future. They aren't taking a permanent moral stand against the military using AI to pull the trigger.
So why restrict it at all right now, if not for moral reasons?
Their argument is purely about current reliability. They are telling the Pentagon that today, frontier AI systems are simply not reliable enough to be trusted with lethal autonomy, and there isn't proper oversight infrastructure built yet.
This is where Sabrina Raimonov's daily experience really brings the theory down to earth.
Yes, the coding example.
She uses Claude code for software development. She points out that while the AI is incredibly impressive at writing functions or analyzing data, the moment you drop it into a massive, complex, existing code base, it gets confused.
It gets lost in the sauce.
Exactly. It hallucinates variables, it makes structural mistakes, it desperately needs a senior human in the loop to review its judgments and catch errors.
That is the perfect analogy, because if the AI gets confused trying to debug a complex web application, imagine giving that same architecture autonomous access to target selection for a kinetic military strike.
The stakes go from a broken web page to a catastrophic international incident.
Anthropic actually offered the Pentagon a research and development partnership specifically to work on improving that reliability over time, but the Pentagon flat out refused. They wanted the restrictions removed immediately.
And the Pentagon tested this restriction with an extreme hypothetical during the negotiations. The Pentagon's technology chief asked Anthropic a very specific question. Would you let Claude help shoot down an incoming nuclear-armed ICBM and intercontinental ballistic missile heading for the United States?
It's the ultimate ticking clock scenario.
It's like something out of a movie.
Yeah.
And the drama here is that both sides ran to the press with completely conflicting stories about how Anthropic answered. The Pentagon leaked that Anthropic refused to help. They painted a picture of a stubborn tech company willing to let a nuclear missile hit an American city because of some rigid internal safety protocol.
But Anthropic fired back, calling that version of events patently false. They stated publicly that every single iteration of the contract language they proposed to the Pentagon explicitly enabled their models to support missile defense.
Which raises an interesting point about how these models actually behave anyway.
Yeah, the sources provide a really wild piece of context here. In recent military war games, when leading AI models, including Claude, were given control of simulated operations, they actually opted for nuclear deployment in most scenarios.
Wait, really? The AI models chose to use nukes?
Yes. They tend to aggressively optimize for wind conditions, and in a simulation, a nuclear strike is a highly effective way to eliminate an adversary's capabilities. So the Pentagon's narrative that the AI or its creators would be too timid to act in a defense scenario is almost the exact opposite of what the war game data actually shows.
Wow. So this dispute over the nuclear hypothetical completely shattered whatever professionalism was left in the room. The standoff spilled directly out into the public square.
It got messy.
Very messy. The Undersecretary of War, Emil Michael, went on Twitter and publicly called Anthropic's CEO, Dario Ahmed, a liar with a god complex. He accused Ameda of wanting to personally control the U.S. military and putting the entire nation's safety at risk.
The Pentagon did try to do some public damage control later. They claimed they had offered Anthropic reasonable compromises during the negotiations. Like, they offered to put federal surveillance laws in writing within the contract, they offered to acknowledge existing weapons policy, and they even invited Anthropic to sit on a new AI ethics board.
But Anthropic read the fine print. They argued that the new contract language the Pentagon proposed was full of legal loopholes. It would essentially allow the military to disregard the safety guardrails at will, claiming operational necessity.
Right.
Anthropic wasn't going to sign a blank check just because it came with a polite invitation to an ethics committee.
What is truly remarkable about this standoff, though, is the reaction from the broader tech industry. The sources note that 400 employees from rival AI companies signed a public letter.
That's huge.
They stood in solidarity with Anthropic, stating, "We won't be divided." It is extremely rare to see that level of cross-company support, and it really shows that the engineers who are actually building this technology across the industry are deeply concerned about the Pentagon's demands.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because up until this point in the timeline, Anthropic looks like the unwavering hero of AI safety.
Yeah, the White Knight.
They are standing up to the Department of War, they're protecting civil liberties, refusing to bend on mass surveillance. But right in the middle of all this, during the exact same week they were drawing these hard lines in the sand with the Pentagon, Anthropic made a very quiet policy update of their own.
Yes, and it completely shifts the narrative. They erased one of their own internal red lines.
Tell me about that.
So Anthropic has a framework called the Responsible Scaling Policy. Inside that policy was a hard, written commitment. If their AI model's capabilities ever outstrip their ability to implement adequate safety measures, Anthropic would pause all training of the AI. They would literally stop building it until they could prove it was safe.
It was a true emergency brake.
Exactly, a self-imposed emergency brake. But that same week, they removed that commitment. They deleted the mandatory pause and replaced it with non-binding public goals. Anthropic's chief science officer, Jared Kaplan, justified this by saying the company felt that pausing AI training wouldn't help anyone.
So let's look at the sheer irony of that timing. You have a company that is willing to risk a $200 million military contract, willing to risk being globally blacklisted as a supply chain risk, and willing to face a Korean War-era federal takeover, all to force the military to adhere to strict safety guardrails.
Right.
But internally, they are quietly erasing their own safety guardrails to ensure they never actually have to stop building and scaling their technology.
It is a profound contradiction. They clearly do not trust the government with an unconstrained model. Yet they are simultaneously lowering the bar on what restricts their own pursuit of building a more powerful model. They are demanding oversight for their clients while removing it for themselves.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? It is very easy to hear about the Pentagon, billion-dollar contracts, and ICBMs and think this is happening in some distant corporate stratosphere.
But it's really not.
It's not. The AI tools you are using today, the ones you use to debug code, to prep for a meeting, or to learn about a new subject, these are the exact same underlying models currently sitting at the absolute center of a tug-of-war over global military dominance and mass domestic surveillance.
The stakes are incredibly high.
The guardrails on your digital reality are being negotiated right now. So I have to ask you, should AI companies, private, profit-driven corporations, be the ones setting their own red lines for national security? Or should the elected government and the military be trusted to decide how this technology is wielded?
It is the defining geopolitical dilemma of our current era. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over long after we sign off today. The focus of this standoff has entirely been about keeping these powerful, unconstrained models out of the hands of our own military due to safety concerns.
Right.
But if the government eventually uses these wartime laws to force tech companies to rip the safety guardrails out of their code, creating models optimized for autonomous targeting and mass surveillance, what happens when adversarial nations inevitably hack into those systems and steal those newly unconstrained, weaponized AI models?
Oh, wow.
By forcing American companies to build an unsafe AI for the military, are we inadvertently building the exact weapon our adversaries will use against us?
That is a chilling thought, and definitely the question we all need to be asking. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring these topics, stay deeply curious, and never stop questioning the systems and the technologies that are actively shaping our world. We'll catch you on the next one.
For more episodes related to media, social media, tech, and privacy, visit our YouTube channel, Independent Thinker LLC.